Sometimes the hardest part of motherhood isn't the chaos, it's the silence after it. It's realizing that for years your safety was built in the sound of little feet running across hardwood floors, in backpacks dropped by the door, in boys wrestling too hard in the living room, in hearing someone calling for you from somewhere in the house before you even stepped out of your room. It's knowing which child is coming down the stairs just by the sound of their footsteps. It's bedtime routines and goodnight songs, baseball bags and muddy shoes, Halloween costumes in July, sprinklers in the backyard, board games around the table, movie nights on the couch. It's a loud, messy, beautiful life that you never realize is shaping your nervous system until one day it's quiet. And suddenly, the thing you thought exhausted you is the very thing you miss the most. Because motherhood doesn't just change your schedule, it changes your body, your heart, your identity. And when your kids start growing up, leaving and building lives of their own, you realize something no one really prepares you for. You spend your whole life raising the people you love the most to leave you. Hey there, and welcome to Mama, Drama, and Trauma. I'm your host, Jenny Kimmel, and today we're talking about something I think every mother feels, but not everyone knows how to say out loud: how sound became safety. For me, motherhood was never just about raising kids. It was the rhythm of my life. It was the noise, the movement, the chaos, the laughter, the constant needing, the late nights, the early mornings, and the beautiful exhaustion of building a family. For years, my house was full. 3 boys, 3 big personalities, a family of 5, a life that was loud and messy and ordinary in all the best ways. And I loved it. I loved the wrestling matches in the living room. I loved hearing them run across the kitchen floor in the mornings. I loved the sports schedules, the school chaos, the family game nights, and even the bedtime routines that felt never ending. Because those weren't interruptions to life, that was life. And then divorce changed everything. Not just the marriage, not just the family structure, everything. The first weekends they left with their dad, the first nights in a quiet house, the first bedtime where the house didn't sound like home anymore. That silence was louder than anything I had ever lived through. Because I wasn't just missing my kids, I was grieving my whole life changing. This episode matters because before we talk about healing, before we talk about rebuilding, before we talk about the lessons motherhood taught me, we have to start here with the sounds, the silence, and the truth that motherhood shaped me in ways I didn't fully understand until the house got quiet. So today we're sitting in that truth, and maybe if you're in that season too, this episode will remind you that you're not alone. The sound of little feet. When my boys were little, home had a sound, and honestly, I think that sound was safety. I always think about that Alan Jackson song, Remember When, where he says, "Remember when the sound of little feet was the music we danced to week," because that's exactly what it was. The sound of little feet was music. Every morning, I'd hear them running across the kitchen floor to come into my bedroom, and before I even opened my eyes, I already knew who it was. I could tell by the footsteps alone, and honestly, I still can. Even now, I can tell who's coming down the stairs just by the sound of how they walk. It's almost full circle. Carson was loud and heavy, and honestly, he still is. I always knew when Carson was coming because there was no quiet entrance. It was loud, heavy footsteps, like he was announcing himself before he even walked into the room. Ryan was different. He's always had those long legs and he's always been the tallest. But even when he was little, there was just a different rhythm to how he moved. Now I can always tell it's him because he comes down the stairs skipping steps and he always slaps that little part of the ceiling above the landing as he comes down. And when he hits the bottom of the stairs, it's always a jump, landing with both feet at the exact same time. The second I hear it, I know it's Ryan. And Derek? Derek was always my quieter one. He moved slower, softer, quieter. He never stormed into a room. He arrived in it. And I always knew. I would hear those little footsteps running across the kitchen floor and smile because I already knew someone was coming to crawl into bed, ask a question, want cuddles, or just be close. And those are the things people don't tell you. Motherhood isn't always made of the big moments. Sometimes it's made of footsteps. Sometimes it's made of hearing Mom yelled from another room. Sometimes it's backpacks dropped by the door, shoes kicked off in the hallway, boys arguing over absolutely nothing, or wrestling matches in the living room that make you think somebody's about to break a bone. And trust me, my boys wrestled constantly. Growing up, it was just me and my sister, no boys. My husband had 2 brothers, and he was the middle child, with one brother 2 years older and one 2 years younger. So when our boys started wrestling nonstop, I remember calling him while he was out of town and saying, "Is this normal? Are boys supposed to wrestle like this all the time? Because I'm pretty sure somebody's about to get hurt." And he just laughed and said, "Yep, totally normal. Me and my brothers did it all the time." And I thought, okay, so this is my life now. Boys standing on the arm of the couch, jumping off like they're professional wrestlers, chaos, noise, constant motion. And honestly, I loved it. I love the craziness. I love the loudness. I love the fact that the house never really sat still. They were big into dress up too. Every Halloween, once costumes went on clearance, I'd go buy as many as I could of the ones they loved. So we had Spider-Man, Iron Man, the Incredible Hulk, all of it. And they would wear those costumes year-round, running through the house, jumping off couches, saving the world from whatever danger existed in our living room that day. And somehow, every single day felt like both complete chaos and the best kind of ordinary. We played everything. The couch was a boat surrounded by sharks. I'd yell, "Hurry, get on the boat, the shark is coming." And they'd act like they were falling in. And I'd grab them yelling, "Swim faster, get on the boat." We played red light, green light across the living room. We played Mother May I. We turned ordinary afternoons into adventures because when your kids are little, imagination fills the whole house. And music was always big too. I'd hook my phone to the speaker and we'd just dance around the house. No reason, no special occasion. Just music, laughter, and kids who still wanted to be with me all the time. And maybe that's the part you miss most. Not just that they were little, but that they wanted you for everything. They wanted you for the games, for bedtime, for the scary dreams, for the random conversations, for the dancing in the kitchen. They wanted your presence, not your perfection. And when I look back now, I realize something I didn't fully understand then. Those sounds were never background noise. They were the soundtrack of my life. And some of my favorite memories weren't even inside the house. They were the summer days outside. The kind of days that felt simple then, but now I realize were everything. The boys had those little buggy push cars when they were younger, and they would ride them all over the yard like they were headed somewhere important. I even got them a little gas pump, and they thought that was the greatest thing ever. They would fill up their cars, and then we'd have car wash days where they'd wash their little cars, tricycles, basically everything they owned. They took that job very seriously. Eventually, they had those battery-powered cars too. One was a dune buggy, one was a John Deere tractor, one was a four-wheeler, and they would ride those things all over the yard like they owned the place. And honestly, they kind of did. Those were the days where I'd sit outside on my swing, watching them run around, listening to all of it. The laughter, the yelling, the pretending, the fighting over whose turn it was, just life happening. Before we had a pool, they'd run through the sprinklers for hours. They had a big playground too, with swings, slides, and a little clubhouse, and they would spend whole afternoons out there while I sat on my porch swing just watching them. Just sitting there, watching your whole world run around barefoot in the backyard. And once we got a pool, summer became pool days and our shark game all over again. The couch had been the boat inside. Now the pool was the ocean, and I'd still be yelling, "Hurry, the shark is coming!" And they'd still be laughing like it was the most important emergency in the world. Winter had its own version too. Snow days, sleds, that little hill in the backyard, watching them fly down it like they had absolutely no fear. And maybe that's what motherhood really is. 1,000 ordinary moments that don't feel extraordinary while you're living them. Until one day, they're the memories that hurt the most to miss. That loud, messy, beautiful life, that was home. The beginning of letting go. I think the first real heartbreak of motherhood isn't when they grow up and start building lives of their own. It starts much earlier than that. For me, one of the first times I really felt it was kindergarten. When Ryan and Derek started kindergarten, it hit me hard. I cried, and I think part of me knew exactly why. Because even though it was exciting, even though they were ready, even though this was normal and healthy and exactly what was supposed to happen, it still felt like the beginning of letting go. I remember when they were little, they loved Caillou. And the theme song said something like, "I'm just a kid who's 4, each day I grow some more." I don't remember the exact words, but I remember thinking when they were 2 years old, oh my gosh, it's going to take forever for them to get to 4. And then suddenly, it didn't. It came fast. Too fast. That's the thing about motherhood. When you're in it, the days can feel so long, but somehow the years are still short. And kindergarten felt like proof of that. I had spent almost 6 years with it being me and my boys all day, every day. They were my everything, my rhythm, my routine, my purpose, my people. And suddenly I was standing at a bus stop realizing they were growing up whether I was ready or not. I remember that first day so clearly. It was me, my mom, and Carson. We took Ryan and Derek to the bus stop, watched them get on the bus, and then we followed the bus to school because I wanted to be there to see them get off for the first time. That feels so me now that I say it out loud. Of course I followed the bus. Of course I needed to see it. And honestly, they were fine. They were excited. They had gone to preschool already, so school wasn't scary to them. They were ready. This was harder for me than it was for them. Because for me, it wasn't just school. It was the first real moment of realizing my babies were growing up. That my little boys who used to run across the kitchen floor in superhero costumes were stepping into a world that needed me a little less. And that hurt. Not because I didn't want them to grow, but because every milestone comes with a little bit of grief. Nobody talks about that enough. We raise our kids to be independent, to be strong, to be capable, to build lives of their own. That's the goal. That's good parenting. But nobody prepares you for the fact that good parenting also means slowly learning how to let go. And that hurts because you're raising the people you love the most in the world to leave you. Not in a bad way, not in a heartbreaking abandonment way, but in the way life is supposed to work. And still, it hurts. Kindergarten was the first little crack in that realization. The first moment I felt the house get quieter. The first moment I understood that motherhood would always be this strange mix of pride and grief happening at the exact same time. You're so proud of who they're becoming, and at the same time, you miss who they were. The one-on-one year. One of the unexpected gifts in motherhood came during a season that also felt like loss. After Ryan and Derek started kindergarten, it was the first time since Carson had been born that it wasn't all three boys with me all day. For so long, it had always been the four of us. Me and my boys, that was our normal. That was our rhythm. So when the twins started school, yes, it was hard because the house got quieter, but it also gave me something I had never really had before, true one-on-one time with Carson. And that year was really special because when you have three kids close in age, especially with twins in the mix, life is busy. It's loud, it's fast, it's constant. You're always dividing your attention, always making sure everyone gets what they need. And suddenly, for the first time, I got this quiet little season where it was just me and him. And I think we both needed that. Carson had always known life with his brothers there. That was all he had ever known. So this was a transition for him too. He missed them when they were gone all day. The house felt different for him too, but it gave us this chance to really bond in a different way. It became easier to do simple things, running errands, going to lunch, little everyday moments that somehow become the memories you hold on to forever. He still went to preschool a few days a week, but the rest of that time felt like hours, just me and him. And sometimes those are the sweetest seasons, the ones that don't look huge from the outside. No big milestone, no dramatic moment, just quiet connection. I got to learn him differently, not as one of the three, but as Carson. His own personality, his own humor, his own way of seeing the world. And if you know Carson, you know he has always been a character. He was my messiest kid by far. Always food somewhere, always chaos. I still laugh thinking about one day when he was little and I had cut up bologna for them to eat. And somehow, still to this day, I truly don't know how. He had a little piece of bologna in his hair. Not a whole slice, just a random little cut up piece of bologna sitting in his hair like it belonged there. And I remember looking at him thinking, how? How did this even happen? How did bologna find its way to your hair? And the funniest part was he had no idea. Completely unbothered, just living life with lunch in his hair. That was Carson. And honestly, those are the moments that stay with you. Not the perfect ones, the weird little ordinary ones that somehow become permanent. That year gave me that. The chance to slow down enough to notice, to bond, to be present, to realize that sometimes motherhood isn't just about managing the chaos. Sometimes it's about noticing the quiet moments hiding inside it. And looking back now, I think that year stayed with me because it reminded me of something important. Every child needs to feel seen for who they are individually, not just as part of the family, but as themselves. And maybe I needed that too, because motherhood can make your whole identity feel wrapped up in taking care of everyone else. But those little one-on-one seasons, They remind you that connection is often built in the smallest moments. Lunch dates, errands, preschool pickup, and apparently baloney in your hair. Motherhood changed my nervous system. I don't think I realized while I was living it just how much motherhood had changed my nervous system. I just thought that was life. I thought that was normal. Being tired, being alert, sleeping, but never really sleeping. Always listening, always scanning, always knowing who needed what before they even asked. That was just motherhood, especially because my husband was gone a lot for work. For years, he traveled 6 to 7 months out of the year, so much of it fell on me. And when you're raising 3 boys, especially little boys close in age, there really isn't an off switch. You are always on. I remember one year when Carson was 1 and Ryan and Derek were 2. That was the year my husband went to Australia for 5 or 6 months. He came home once around the 4th of July for about a week, and then I went back with him for about 2 weeks. And I remember 2 things very clearly. One, it was amazing to get to go to Australia, a once-in-a-lifetime kind of trip. And 2, I miss my boys like crazy. I had never been away from them for that long. It was nice to get away, but it didn't feel right because my body had already learned that home was them. The noise, the chaos, the constant movement, that was safety. That was normal. I don't think I ever really got a full night's sleep back then. I slept, but I was never fully off. Even sleeping, I was listening. Listening for footsteps, listening for crying, listening for someone getting sick, listening for silence that felt suspicious. Because sometimes silence with little kids is the scariest sound of all. And motherhood teaches you that you become part detective, part nurse, part referee, part therapist, part short order cook, and somehow still expected to function like a normal human being. I remember Halloween one year, one of those nights that perfectly captures motherhood. One of the boys wasn't feeling good, but of course it was Halloween, and nobody wants to miss Halloween. So we went trick-or-treating anyway. We lived in a neighborhood where every house sat on about 4 acres, so people usually went somewhere else to trick-or-treat. That night, we were at my cousin's neighborhood. My son made it to a few houses and then said, "I don't feel good." So I sat in the car with him while the others kept going. Then we went to a trunk or treat and he tried again for a little bit, but he still felt awful. On the way home, he threw up all over the car. And at that point, it becomes full survival mode. Get home, get the kid out, get a bath, clean the car, handle the candy, handle the chaos. And then we walk into the house from the garage, right where the kids always came in and dropped their shoes and backpacks. And another kid throws up all over the floor, different kid, different mess, same night. And I remember just standing there thinking, of course this is how tonight is going. That was motherhood, messy, chaotic, beautiful, even in the hard moments, just baths, cleanup, and trying to keep everyone alive. I remember Ryan waking us up one night saying, "Something's wrong with Carson. He's breathing funny." And suddenly you're wide awake, panic, ambulance, hospital. Everything ended up being okay, but in those moments, your whole body shifts into something primal. Protect, fix, help, no hesitation, just instinct. I remember Derek smashing his finger in a door at my mom's house and us rushing to the ER because his whole fingernail was a disaster. I remember Ryan's eye surgeries for strabismus, 3 of them. That last one was brutal because he was older and the stitches were scratching his eye and he just cried. And there is nothing worse than watching your child hurt when you can't fix it. Derek had hernia surgery. Carson had the cut by his eyebrow when he was just learning to walk. He still has that scar. And then there's the story I still feel guilty about. Ryan broke his leg when he was little. He slipped on a blanket on the hardwood floor and fell. He was a couple months shy of turning 2, and I kept saying, "You're okay, you're fine." Because I was that mom, brush it off, you're okay, keep going. But he kept favoring that leg. He wasn't putting much pressure on it. He wasn't jumping around and playing with his brothers like he normally would. And when nap time came, I really knew something was wrong because he wouldn't lay down. And my kids were always good nappers. So I called the doctor, took him in, and sure enough, broken leg. A full broken leg. And I felt like the worst mother in the world because I had kept telling him he was fine, but the poor kid had a broken leg. And there he was with a big blue cast on his leg for his 2nd birthday. And the funniest part was Carson ended up with what felt like a million bruises all over his face from that big blue cast. Because of course, even with a broken leg, they were still trying to roughhouse and wrestle and be boys. So Ryan had the cast, Carson had the bruises, and I had the mom guilt. That sounds about right. I still think about that because motherhood teaches you this too. You will carry guilt over things your kids probably don't even remember. You will replay moments. Question yourself. Wonder if you should have known sooner. That's part of loving them too. And through all of it, I realize now, my body learned safety through noise, through movement, through chaos, through little voices, through busy days. That loud, crazy house full of boys, that wasn't stress, that was home. When the house got quiet, nothing prepares you for the silence, not really. People talk about divorce, they talk about custody schedules, they talk about co-parenting and paperwork and figuring out how holidays work. But nobody really talks about the silence. Nobody tells you what it feels like to go from a house full of boys to dead quiet. And for me, that was one of the hardest parts of everything because my house had always been loud. There was always something. Footsteps coming down the stairs, someone yelling from another room, video games too loud, arguments over nothing, sports bags dropped by the door, shoes everywhere, a wrestling match happening in the living room for absolutely no reason. It was never quiet. And then suddenly, it was. The first weekends they left with their dad were hard, really hard. At first, it wasn't immediate. It was kind of a slow transition. At first, he wasn't taking them overnight at all. Then he would get them on Saturdays. Then Saturdays turned into staying the night and coming home Sunday morning. At that point, he was living in the camper and it was farther away, so weekdays weren't really happening yet. Sometimes he'd take them out to dinner one night during the week and bring them back. Then eventually it became every other weekend. Then once he got his house, it turned into the real schedule. Certain days at his house, certain days at mine. So it wasn't one giant overnight change. It happened slowly, but somehow that almost made it harder because every step of it felt like another version of this is real. This is my life now. I remember those first quiet weekends. At first, I just sat in the silence, and I would think, what has become of my life? How did I get here? How did I go from this loud, chaotic, fun-filled house to this? To dead silence, to sitting alone, wondering how everything changed so fast. And yes, I cried a lot because I wasn't just missing my kids. I was grieving my whole life changing. I love my family life. I love the 5 of us together, board games around the table, movie nights, trips to Elephant Rock State Park, just being together. I love the loudness, the chaos, the craziness. That was us. And suddenly I was staring at the reality that even though the kids and I could still do those things, it would never be a family of 5 doing it again. That grief is hard to explain because it isn't just divorce. It's mourning the life you thought you'd still have, the version of your family you thought was permanent. And I think that realization hit me hardest at night. Bedtime was always the hardest. Always. During the day, I could keep myself busy. I could study, clean, work, run errands, find something to focus on. When I was studying for my real estate exam, I mean it when I say I studied all weekend. Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. That was how I coped. I filled the silence with something because I knew I couldn't just sit in it forever. I couldn't stay there crying every weekend. I had to figure out how to survive it. But nighttime was different because when you lay down at night, there's nowhere to run, no distractions, no busy work, no noise, just your thoughts. And I remember laying there thinking over and over, just go to sleep. Please just go to sleep. Because I didn't want to think about any of it anymore. I didn't want to replay it. I didn't want to sit in the grief. I didn't want to feel the emptiness. I just wanted sleep because sleep meant a break. And I think a lot of people understand that feeling. When rest doesn't feel like rest, it feels like escape. That was bedtime for me. And maybe that's why this episode matters so much. Because before I learned how to rebuild, before I learned how to focus on myself again, before I learned how to come home to myself, there was this, the silence, and learning how to survive it. I think one of the hardest truths about motherhood is realizing that so much of it is made up of moments you don't know are important until they're gone. The sound of little feet running across the kitchen floor, the bedtime routines, the sports chaos, the wrestling matches in the living room, the summer days outside, the late night talks, the loudness, the mess, the ordinary things that never really felt ordinary. And then one day you look around and realize the house is quieter. The routines have changed. The people you built your whole world around are growing up. And you're standing in the middle of a life that looks nothing like the one you thought you'd have. That kind of grief is real. And I think sometimes we minimize it because motherhood teaches us to keep going, to hold it together, to stay strong, to focus on everyone else. But grief deserves honesty. And if you're sitting in that quiet right now, if your kids are growing up, moving out, spending weekends away, building lives of their own, or if life simply doesn't look the way you thought it would, I want you to know this. You're not disappearing. You are evolving. This season is not the end of you. It's the beginning of learning who you are outside of who everyone else needed you to be. And that matters. Take the time, take the breath, take the walk, take the bath, read the book, sit with yourself, start finding your way back home. Because just like Dr. Denise told me, take that time and invest it back into you. Give yourself the love you've spent so many years giving everyone else. That's where healing starts. That's where rebuilding starts. That's where coming home to yourself begins. Thank you for sitting with me for this one. This episode is the foundation for everything we're talking about this month because before we talk about the lessons my boys taught me, we had to start here with the sounds, the silence, and the love that shaped all of it. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it, follow the show, and subscribe because every follow helps more people find mama drama and trauma. You can also find more reflections, healing resources, blogs, and free tools for your own healing journey at Mama Drama and Trauma. That's where I share even more of this work. real conversations, honest healing, and reminders that you are never as alone as you feel. And if this episode spoke to your heart, go back and listen to some of the earlier episodes too, because this journey is built piece by piece. And the funny thing is, even now, some things haven't changed. My boys are 18 and 17, and they are still wrestling. I was literally just yelling at them to stop because now they're so big, they're putting holes in my walls. So now it's not just stop, someone's going to get hurt. It's stop, you're going to damage the house. And I'm threatening to take their phones away like that's somehow going to stop it. And it just makes me laugh because for all the ways life has changed, for all the quiet moments, for all the growing up, some of that chaos is still there. Some of that sound is still there. And maybe that's a reminder that not everything is gone. Some things just grow with you. And as always, you are strong, you are worthy, and your story matters. Until next time, take care of you.